Hi, Jackie. I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to speak with you today.
Hi,
And
Susan. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
yeah, you're welcome. I'm really glad that you were able to come. And I wanted to just start out with a question that maybe will guide our conversation today. And that question was, I work with a lot of people who want to really change. They don't want to just do a subtle change and then flip back to the old ways. And I was thinking that with reading everything that you are working on, is how can self-talk help that or hinder that change of being stuck in the same place and feeling like you kind of do well for a while and then you ricochet back to your old habits. I wonder if we could
Absolutely.
start there.
Yes, I would love to. It's an excellent question because I think when it comes to self talk, what many people don't realize is there is this sort of silent narrator running in the background of our lives, shaping like our decisions and affecting our outcomes. And it's basically the voice of our brain that is the record of our past. I mean, all of our memories, everything we experience in life, how we look at life
Mhm.
is based on everything we've been through. And our brain is constantly recording every experience at every moment. And, I'm sure you've heard the explanation of the brain really only having two goals, which is to protect us and to make sure we procreate, right? And that's it. And so if you look at our experiences through that lens and how our brain uses the information that it has, it's just using it to protect us, and our brains have no problem lying to us also to
Mhm.
protect us. And so what happens is we start to tell ourselves stories based off of our experiences. And again, just like if you live next to the train tracks for years and eventually you would tune out the train, your subconscious still hears it, but you no longer really hear it on a conscious level. And that's kind of the same with our self talk. It's running in the background based off of our experiences, and more specifically, paying a lot of attention to our negative
Mhm.
experiences.
Mhm.
And so when I'll just sort of give you a random example, but let's say in middle school, kids were making fun of your clothes. And fast forward, you're in high school and somebody says, "Nice jacket." Now, your brain is constantly scanning for danger to protect you. And it goes back to all of your recent, your experiences in your life. And it thinks, when kids at school talk about my clothes, it was always to make fun of me. I bet
Mhm.
that comment is sarcastic, not true. And so we will have the perception then in that moment that possibly we're being made fun of, that someone's not actually, liking our jacket. And so it's just sort of the million one of a million things that can happen to us through the course of the day where we don't even realize that we're making that assessment based off of kids making fun of our school clothes in middle
Mhm.
school, but
Yeah.
we put it through that filter. And so when it comes to the self-talk, if we're not paying attention, it will hold us back from change because it will say,
Mhm.
even, and that's where I mentioned earlier, our brains have no problem lying to us. Even if
Mhm.
we're trying to make a change that's healthier, a change that supports, some sort of success we're trying to have, our brain's like, I don't know if you could fail if you do that and you're going to look stupid. Like, everybody else is already doing that. And you think you're going to go in and make a difference. And or you've tried to lose weight before and you've always failed. Like, why do you think it's going to work this time? Like, that's just not who you are. You're not a healthy person, you're not a fit person. And we don't even realize that voice is so small and it's whispering these things to us in the background. So it can often hold us back from change
Mhm.
because it's wired to protect us, but we have to override that mechanism.
Good points. It's like the jacket comment could have been a positive comment, but it was
Yes.
interpreted as a negative comment. And so the brain was like, danger, danger. I want to protect you from this comment. So we're going to respond like we're going to hear it as negative. We're going to respond as negative, and then it's the same old story, the safe
Yes.
story that we know. So talk a little bit more about the neurobiology that you were just mentioning.
Absolutely. You just touched on it. So when we talk about things like fight or flight, we think of, like a car comes swerving into our lane, something where our life is actually in danger. But
Mhm.
in that moment of someone commenting on your jacket, if you interpret it as, sarcastic or an insult, you also go into fight or flight. There are varying levels of it. And so what happens is you narrow your focus, you become hyper fixated on the comment. Now you start looking down at your shoes and your jeans and wondering if, those also look stupid. You're questioning what you wore last week. Now you're wondering if, those people that you thought liked you at the beginning of the school year actually do. And it's interesting how we will spiral and and all of
Mhm.
this happens in a millisecond, Susan. That's the other thing that's so
Mhm.
sort of mind blowing is we can have this whole thought process that I just described in a millisecond, and it will take us down, a negative pathway. And so we, start having cortisol levels rise, which is what happens in fight or flight. Like I said, we narrow our focus, we ruminate on the problem. Our prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of your brain that
Mhm.
starts to introduce reasoning, will actually start to go offline in those moments. And so now you're even less able to stop yourself and rationalize whether or not the comment was actually negative. And so we put ourselves in these states of stress sort of without even realizing it until we start to practice becoming aware. And our bodies are unbelievable pieces of
Mhm.
machinery. I mean, they are fantastic. But if we don't understand how they work, we can't use them to our benefit. And there is a way to use our bodies in our brain and
Mhm.
our nervous system to our benefit. But if we just let it sort of run on its own, without any guidance, it can go haywire. It was wired for a different environment, not for 2026.
Right, right. So if we're going back to that example, we have this one example we keep going back to, which is the coat, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the memory of being a younger person with being made fun of. And what kind of practices, because if we're trying to develop like new neural pathways and really stick this new message of, self-consciousness is something that is also a story that you tell yourself, and that we're strengthening the other stories in our life, the ones that are more positive. We're seeing more positive things around us, experiencing other people as more positive if we've come from a bad situation. Um, how do we how do we actually stick it so that, okay, we don't have the coat issue anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The coat issue is gone.
Okay.
And are we still always susceptible? Because I know, sometimes we're always susceptible to have those primary feelings like rejection or loneliness or abandonment. So I wonder if what other practices and what are the major practices that create the permanent shifts?
Sure. It all has to start with awareness. And so one thing I like to offer people is to really start paying attention to how your body feels in certain situations. And so it could be anything from you're about to speak on stage or you're, about to play in a volleyball game, but you might feel a little anxiety, which could be a little mix of, excitement, but notice it in your body. And I always say, like, for me, it's almost always in my chest. And so I will touch my chest, and this sounds like the funniest piece of advice, but it
Mhm.
works for me 99.9% of the time. Talk out loud to yourself. And so, for instance, if I'm about to speak somewhere and I'm nervous, I will say out loud, I'm feeling a little nervous about this speaking engagement. That's normal. I Everything's going to be okay. The worst case scenario, I flop, but you know what? I will always learn. Every experience I have, I've prepared for it, and it's I'm going to do my best, and that's all I can do.
Mhm.
And the reason I like doing that is, one, when you start to become aware of the feeling in your body, it's the easiest way to cue yourself, oh, something's going on. Because we just go through our day and we have all these feelings and these ups and downs. And,
Mhm.
because you're just trying to get through your day, you're getting on to the next thing. You're going to the grocery store, you're recording your podcast, then you're doing this, then you have a phone call, then you're doing that.
Mhm.
And so, just like the train, living by the train tracks, we sort of stop being aware of those feelings. And so being
Mhm.
aware when you're sort of having an emotion or a feeling is a cue that something's going on. And then doing things like breathing or talking to yourself target your nervous system as well, because when you hear yourself speak out loud, you sort of remove yourself and become almost a third person in the process. And it allows you to look from the outside in. It's almost like, too, you're getting advice because you can hear this voice speaking. And then that will reduce the cortisol levels. It will, let your prefrontal cortex come back online so that your, executive thinking and functioning can come back on, and, even stimulate your vagus nerve so that you can just lower your heart rate. So there are a lot of physiological effects that we can do from really basic things, and breathing is another one, but you have to start with the awareness that it's happening.
Mhm.
And it has to start there, or you can't, if you don't know something's happening and you can't acknowledge it, you can't fix it.
Right, right. Especially if it's all jumbled together in a bunch of things happening at the same time, just like describing the day, we're having feelings up and down all day long. So it's not like you're going to stop on every single feeling,
Right.
but if you're trying to work on the habit of how you usually feel or something that holds you back.
Yeah.
And also I always think about it too as like the pattern interrupters. Like you just showed us a pattern interrupter, right? That you like put your hand on your chest and you heard yourself speaking and then you did a good reframe of like could go this way, could go this way. I wonder if you notice, especially let's just use just the topic of speaking, of public speaking, which what most people in the world have a really hard time with. It's not like
Right.
there's like maybe like 5% are like, yes, we can do it because we're extroverts and no problem. But
It's
most people are
everything.
struggling with it in a little
Yeah.
bit of a way. So
Sure.
when you look at your overcoming and getting yourself to the point of the speaking engagements that you do now, what do you feel like um has been things that you've actually diminished? Like they don't even register anymore. Some of the things that you've worked on,
Oh,
like the
so
self-talk and the
sure.
awareness.
Sure. Uh, I think, like a lot of people, I had a fear that I just sound stupid, and so I did, really work on that by listening to myself, and also the reframe. You just said it.
Mhm.
That's where so much of our power is, because if I'm telling myself a narrative, like, what if I sound ridiculous? And then my brain goes and finds evidence of times that things didn't go so well that I spoke, and I go down that rabbit hole.
Mhm.
My power lies in my reframe. And one of the
Mhm.
things that just worked for
Yeah,
me is we are all so unique and we don't want to sound just alike. You and I sound different on podcasts, Susan, and that's a
right,
good thing. They don't want
right.
two Susans and they don't want two Jackies. And so for me, the power was in my reframe that however I speak is how I speak. And the people that
Right.
like it will like it, and the people that don't. But that's where actually my power lies, is in my own uniqueness. And so reframing situations is a way to really shunt that negativity into a more, and it's not just being positive, it is also, you're playing a part in manifesting your future. Frankly, you are, when you do that, you're saying, this can come true. I can be a good speaker. I can be a good dresser. If you've told a narrative that you're not good at picking out clothes from the time you were in middle school. And I find it happen in relationships a lot too, having been
Mhm.
a high conflict divorce coach, because when you are in a relationship with someone else who's trying to impose narratives on you, because that is a way that they have kept control over you, that's what I found working with people, is that's another area where the negative self-talk comes in, is when someone else has installed their own narratives. And frankly, through brainwashing, right? We know that repeating something works in when we're trying to get people to believe it. And so when you've had someone say something negative about you for a long time, your body starts to, and your brain starts to believe it and look for evidence that it might be true. And so that reframe, that stopping, that acknowledging that a negative narrative is playing, and then looking for evidence that it's not true is powerful. But you're right, you can't do it for every single emotion all day long. So you
Right.
have to sort of start with the ones that are
Hmm.
really big, or,
Hmm.
and I will ask clients, I'll flat out say, in your relationship, what are one or two things that this person constantly said about you that you did or whatever that you would
Hmm.
never heard before? And they always have an answer. Oh, I can tell you. He or she says, I'm always this or I'm always that. And I've never thought that about myself before.
Hmm.
And I'll be like, aha, that's their narrative.
Right. And also you're looking at like two very triggered brain chemistry people that are very triggered with each other. So when we're triggered, right? When our frontal cortex goes offline and our brain starts telling us we have to protect ourselves and survive, right? That's the only job. And they create a story for us, right, to follow.
Yeah.
So that we're like, okay, there's that story again. Um, it's two people that aren't actually really in the present, actually having an experience, talking in I statements, knowing, what they want to have happen instead of what is happening, right? Or how to
Yes.
redirect it, or how to repair, or how to pause. Like I think the major part of pause. Um, but going back to a little bit of what you said with the speaking and what you work on with yourself in terms of the reframe and also just the self-talk that you do about acceptance, right? You know
Yes.
what mine is?
Yes. Please tell me. I would love
Yeah,
to
mine
know.
is mine is that just anticipatory anxiety, which I think a lot of people have, and anxiety and rumination take up the brain, so much of the brain power, right?
Yes.
That thought of like if you continue to think about something over and over again, and if you stop worrying, ruminating, having anxiety, wow, you'd have so much more brain accessibility, right? So mine is right before a talk when there's nothing I can do. I've done everything I could do. I prepared. I know my talk. I know the first line. If I don't talk to myself and remind myself, all you can do right now is relax,
Mm,
that I will convince myself that I really forgot the first thing I was going to say and the second thing and possibly the third
yeah.
story. And I will start working that narrative. And maybe I'll get myself so worked up that I won't have anything to say when I go up there. But
Yeah.
now it's like the job is to just relax. There's nothing I can do. So I just really work on right before I go on is to just speak, to just breathe and be in the present. Like I really don't, I just like, you're gonna that this will be a better way to remember things is just to not have anything in your mind right now.
I love that. My job right now is to relax. That's my only
Right.
job. I absolutely love that. So it's
Right.
like,
So my brain actually goes offline. I mean, goes not offline. It stops thinking and it
mhm.
just like is just like being aware of my body. Like how relaxed can I make my body? How present can I make myself be? If you're in your breath, you're definitely present.
Oh,
Like if you're
yes,
only thinking about your breath. But if you're ruminating and worrying, then your brain is going to start making up the story about, like what you said, finding evidence of the times that you forgot. And then maybe you didn't, but the more present you can be, the more access you have, right, to your frontal lobe, to your mind. Your mind is back online.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it goes back to, again, understanding how our bodies work because, we've all read and seen memes and had advice that you should breathe, but why? And, the reason is, again, when you breathe in, specifically for me, I like to have people, maybe you do this as well, Susan, but really slow the exhale. And that, is what can kind of, again, bring down your heart rate and start to trigger your body or signal your
Mhm.
body that the cortisol levels can reduce. And so, there are major physiological benefits and actions happening in your body when you breathe. So it's not just a nice to do, fa la 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 la. It's you are changing,
Mhm.
the biochemistry and what's happening in your body. And so it's really important. I mean, we have these tools at
Mhm.
our fingertips that I would say they're simple, but not necessarily easy, right? So they may just be simple in that breathing, but we forget to do them in
Right.
those key moments. And so I love that you do that because,
Right.
like, my only job is to relax. That's my only
Right.
job.
But I think that you're getting on something if we're talking about like how to establish real change, right? Not just change that lasts like a week or a talk, but real change that you don't have to go back and worry about that jacket
Yeah.
comment means that all these other stuff from the past. Um, I think there's also something about we can get as many tools as we can get, but it's really like working the tools, right? And having the awareness like, okay, here's where I work the tool.
Yeah.
Here's where I stop and breathe. Here's where I actually slow my breath down even further. Here's where I know what my brain is doing. Like I already have the pattern. I know what my brain is going to do. It's predictable brain, protection and survival.
Yes.
And it's predictable. So I can be aware of when it's starting to make up a story. But it is really working the tools. Like it's really working on it, not just like calling it in.
It really is. And on the subject of change, if you can articulate to yourself or write down in a sentence what it is you're trying to change or what change you would like to occur, there is a very, very important component that I believe you have to execute. And that is
Mhm.
you have to truly believe you are that other version of yourself. And in fact, I remember a long time ago hearing about folks that had failed at smoking cessation or weight loss. And upon some extensive interviews, they found that those people couldn't quite see themselves as a non smoker. Like that's a brand new identity. You are a
Right.
non-smoker. What does a non-smoker do? Well, they obviously don't leave the house with their cigarettes or have them in their car or have them anywhere they can find them. They don't buy them because they're not a
Right.
smoker. They don't, their clothes don't smell like smoke. So, maybe they need to wash all their clothes. They're like, you have to really think like someone who's a non-smoker. And then that was what the feedback was, as weight loss too. Do you actually see yourself as a fit person? This is your new identity, a fit person, and so, the examples go on and on. But so I
Mhm.
challenge people to write down exactly who their future self is. Use all the adjectives. This is why, honestly, I love vision boards and I call them victory boards because I call it winning, like
Oh,
winning at
nice.
life, like you're winning. Like, what does it look like when you've won what you're trying to do? And so, just anything that reminds you of who you are now, this person that now didn't just make a change, but they embodied it. This is part of their characteristic, their personality, their whatever it is they're trying to achieve. You have to truly believe you are that version and the other one no longer exists.
Mhm. So do your clients tell you it's a lot of work
We
to
do it
change?
in baby steps, but yeah, it is. It is because
Mhm.
I think the challenge is when there's backsliding, which is or you wake up on a day where you feel like all is lost and none of your work is evident or paying off. And that's also part of the process. And this is the way I look at it. I always tell them, like, look, you're trying to make this change, whether it's, kind of stopping rumination about something or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And you woke up one day and everything's backfiring and you feel like you're right back to square one. That's just your nervous system testing it out. And it's like,
Mhm.
that's the way I look at it anyway. You have to go through this process of having these hurdles put back in place so you can see if you can overcome them and truly be, see if you've made that change. Unless you test it, you don't know if it's stuck. So I think
Right.
that's probably
Right.
one of the hardest things is to when you feel backsliding or like you did take that one step backwards or it feels like
Right.
it
So
all
it's
got
a
back
it's a
in
new way
place.
of gathering evidence, right?
Yes. New
So it's a
way of
new way. It's
gathering
not the
evidence.
brain's way of it's gathering evidence. Am I really believing in the new persona that I'm trying to develop, or
Yes.
the thing that I really want to change? Am I really believing in myself? I always like the thought of maybe also having and maybe this is how you identify as a coach and your clients identify with you is like you need someone to believe in you too, while
Oh,
you're trying to make changes. That is a really powerful thing, especially if there's a lot of doubt. right?
Absolutely.
Moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. It is. It's so powerful. That's one of the things I love about being a coach is because, you and I both have evidence of so many people that have made wonderful changes and been through really difficult times and,
Mhm.
come out the other side. And I'm sure you and I have had our own trials and tribulations, right? And tried to do some work to be better at something or overcome something. And so I mean, I have no problem telling them, I promise them it's going to get better or they're going to be able to achieve that because I believe it
Mhm.
wholeheartedly. And
Yes.
I love giving that validation because it's so sincere. I truly believe it. And I know that each and every one of them are capable of achieving, whatever
Right.
it is they're trying to do.
Yeah. I talk about it in terms of like I'm holding space for them until they believe it. But I'm believing it, right?
I
With
love
them,
that.
I know that that there's going to be a better chapter or there's going to be a new evolution of themselves that they find,
I,
that kind of that sixth stage of when you're trying to heal from the loss of a relationship is like you really work on the part of yourself that needs to change so that you can have a healthier relationship, and not just with the primary person, but with everybody.
yeah,
Like it might be like especially with yourself, right? And this might be the thing about how you sustain change, how you really believe in this future self, this like the victory board. I love that. Like where you want to get to.
yeah.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love that. I will hold space for you and believe it until you do. That is so powerful, Susan.
Hmm.
I'm sure your
Yeah.
clients really appreciate that because even I'm feeling that as you're saying it. It's so powerful, and to me it also comes down to trusting yourself. You're right, and so as you're learning this new behavior in this new pathway of I am this new person. I do you little by little you build trust with yourself that it's true.
Hmm.
And you're right, and you will naturally just start to sleep better and go more confident throughout your day because you have trust that it's true and you are this version of yourself that you would always hope to be. And to me that's almost like what real peace is that you trust yourself. And so for me, I know when I was just going through hard times in my life, one of the areas I had problems with was boundaries. And so upsetting people who did upsetting things really got to me because I didn't know how to hold boundaries. And the more I got used to that, and people just anywhere in society, from the grocery store to people who were close to me, learned you don't go that where, you just don't get to go there with me. You don't get to speak to me like that, whatever it is.
Right.
Um, it was more about having trust in myself that I could hold that boundary. And that's where I truly started to feel peace. And
Right.
so,
So the
yeah,
holding boundary was like an internal thing and an external thing. Like you could kind of work on it as almost a mirror. If you held a
right.
boundary and then you felt like, hey, I didn't let that person talk to me like that. And then externally, there's what? More distance, more respect, more, um, so it is an internal and external process because you get kind of that you might get tested too externally. Like people might be like, I don't care if you said that. I'm still doing it.
Yep.
So tell me about that. The conflict sometimes of what you want to do or how you want to have your life is both internal and external. How does that work?
Sure. I think, as you mentioned, it starts internally, A, with making a decision,
Hmm.
and B, being able to really visualize yourself executing those things. In my case, the boundaries. But you're right. And then it will show up in your external world. And I don't want to misrepresent this because we're not trying to control other people. We have no control over other people. We only have
Right.
control, right, over ourselves. So I have control over responding to a person who's just violated my boundary or completely ignoring them. And not no answer is an answer, things like that. And so it starts with an internal decision. And very often it's so uncomfortable to make that change. It feels weird. It feels odd, even again, if it's good for you or change that, is healthy for you, a change that supports your success, your career, your family, friendships, whatever it is, your health. It feels really uncomfortable. And that's just because it's not familiar. And again, going way back to the beginning of our conversation, where I said our brains will easily
Mhm.
lie to you to keep you safe. Safe is also a little bit of a misnomer. Your brain just likes what's familiar, right? because it can predict better there, and it's a predicting machine. As long as I can predict what's going on here, even if the environment isn't totally safe or totally healthy, I'd rather be here because at least I have more information and I could maybe more accurately predict what's going on. So when you leave
Mhm.
any situation and you're trying to grow in another direction, you are going to be extremely uncomfortable because you are leaving that familiar zone. And I don't even want to say comfortable because sometimes it's not comfortable and it's not even safe,
Right,
but you
right.
will still stay because it's familiar. And so, as you're leaving that familiar zone, you really have to talk yourself through why this is better for you. Remind yourself why you're
Mhm,
making this
mhm.
change, that you are this new version of yourself, or you've achieved this change you want to achieve, because there's going to be some retaliation by your brain and your nervous system. And I just want people to know it's normal. You don't have to listen to it. You
Right.
remind yourself why
Mhm.
you're headed in this other direction or why you're doing what you're doing, and you will overcome that speed bump, or that molehill, and you will get to the other side and you'll be so happy. But to grow past that and escape that familiar zone, can be very uncomfortable.
Right. So you might have to have markers along the way, right?
Good
That you
idea.
remind yourself, okay, this is so uncomfortable that I am not going to fall back into it, but I really have to remind myself why I'm trying to get out of it because I don't see the benefits yet. It's really uncomfortable, right?
Oh, that's such a good point. You don't see the
Mhm.
benefits yet. That is a
Mhm.
really good
Right.
point. And yeah,
Mhm.
you have to remind yourself like the benefits are coming. I may not see them yet. I mean, it's just like, if you want six-pack abs, you don't see them on the third, fourth, fifth, or even the 10th, workout, right? But you have to trust that they're coming if you're going to the gym and doing sit-ups every day. And the same happens with our brains when we're trying
Mhm.
to, kind of rewire, our nervous system, or rewire some pathways that we're really focused on ruminating before something bad. Um,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
even like the idea about if we're working on having quality relationships or relationships that are more harmonious, that means that you might have to be spending some time alone to get some reserve up to actually choose the right places where you're going to connect with people, right? That it's
that's
not
a
going to be sometimes it's like the over connection numbs you out and you're just like, okay, well, at least I don't have to, at least I'm connecting. It doesn't matter who quality or quantity is more important than quality. But if you're starting to work on the quality of your life, you actually have to spend some time in practicing these grounding techniques or practicing a different way of thinking about things like the reframing or just being able to be in a space where you can be this way on your own. Like it's not about an interaction. Like I always think about women tend to regulate themselves in relationship
mm,
instead of on their own. And it's actually probably a little better or really important to build the muscle of regulating yourself on your own because we're such like typically, stereotypically nurturers or
uh,
can tend to figure out what the other person's doing or how might we be in connecting with them instead of them connecting with us. It's more of that kind of biochemistry, I think, that happens to females in a lot of ways. And again, I'm speaking stereotypically,
sure.
but that also means like building up different muscles in different ways, not just in relationship with other people.
Absolutely. Having time to yourself, like you said, and practicing is the key word. That's what it is. You're
Yeah.
practicing, and no one's good at anything on the first try, rarely. So we all have to practice. And yeah, that goes with self regulating, which, oh gosh, Susan, you're absolutely right. I mean, the ability to self regulate, again, it speaks back to the trust. You're able to trust yourself that
So
you
how do
can
you
do
think,
that
how would
on
you
your
define
own.
that? How would you define that as a practice, self-regulating? Because people throw that word around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that we give the people that are listening a few things. One is like something about picking an area where they might want to change and how they might be able to like start approaching that. And the other is like just a few tips, like maybe ways to self-regulate might help.
Sure. Sure.
What do you think?
So when I think of self-regulation, it makes me think of the word triggers. And the reason is, right, because if you're having to regulate yourself, something's happened to you that sort of sent you spinning maybe a little bit, or you're feeling it in your body, like I talked about earlier. And what I like to say, because I tend to work with people who have been in relationships where, this person is trying to trigger them a lot, And I always say, we can't necessarily stop the triggers because again, our bodies are wired to search for danger and to set off an alarm if they
Mhm.
feel like something's off, even if it's a comment, let alone a car swerving in our lane. So you can't necessarily stop the actual trigger or shut down because that'd be shutting down your nervous system. Where you have power is practicing. Susan, I'll talk about what that looks like in shortening your reaction time. And to me, that's self regulating. So,
Mhm.
for instance, if I have someone that was doing really antagonizing stuff to me for a long time, and then a lot of time goes by and I haven't even spoke with them, and one day I get a text and they text something that's they know will upset me, and I feel that reaction. So my power is trying to shorten that reaction time so that it doesn't steal minutes from my day where I'm focused on this person or this situation, assuming it's not an emergency that I have to deal with. And I'm able to take my day back. I'm able to take my time back. I'm able to take my emotions back. And so again, it starts with awareness. Okay, this is happening. This is a trigger. And then for me, it's a series of questions. And again, because I work with people who were leaving, abusive relationships, basically, you have to really ask yourself if these things are true that have triggered you. Is what they're saying true? It's going back to the jacket. Am I really bad at picking out clothes because this is the jacket that's in style and 50 other kids have it on today, at school. So you have to really look at evidence and ask yourself if what's triggering
Right.
you is really, really true. And then it goes also to the reframe. How do I reframe this situation? Well, if I'm wearing a jacket that's, the same as 50 other kids, or if I'm, there's a million examples, but then, if I'm going on stage it doesn't mean because I have anxiety that I'm a bad speaker. You have to really ask yourself if it's true and then
Yeah,
reframe,
the
like you
meaning that you
said,
give it, the meaning that
the
you're giving it,
meaning that you
and
give it.
challenge the meaning
Yes,
of.
and challenge
Mhm.
the meaning. And I tell people, do whatever it takes, frankly, to interrupt that cycle. So whether it's breathing, whether it's, I always say, don't leave your brain unattended. Have that positive podcast ready. I listen to this, even if I'm not meditating, I'll have meditation music on in the background sometimes. When I was going through really difficult times in my life, I learned I could not leave my brain unattended. So I had to really take action steps
Mhm.
to have positive things around, whether it
Right. Give
meant,
your brain some assignments.
yes, give it some assignments. So whether it is writing, whether it's saying it over and over, talking out
Mhm.
loud to myself, listening to positive stuff, looking up Susan's podcast, like whatever it is,
Yeah.
breathe, do your breathing
Mhm.
exercises, jump in some water, whatever it is, go for a walk, be out in nature, hug a tree, honestly, do it, find what works for you, find what's practical in your life and actually do it, because interrupting that cycle so that you can shorten that reaction time is just helping you practice, to use your word, perfect word, practice going a different direction than down that path
Mhm. Mhm.
of reacting to the trigger.
Mm. And how would you um, advise someone like in your coaching session to choose like maybe one or two things that they're working on that might be maybe the hardest or the baseline or the things that feeds the other things, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I usually just have them, start out with, what is bothering you the most right now? Like, is there a way you can give me number one, number two, and number three?
Yeah.
And then we'll break it down from there. And that can change from week to week, and that's okay. But what is bothering you the most right
Mhm.
now? And
Mhm.
we just start with that, because if it is bothering them that bad, then we're going to have to address it sometime anyway. So whether we have to dig a little deeper and find out if that's a symptom of something else, or if it is really that thing proper that's happening, we'll talk about why it's triggering them. Again, what's true, what's not
Mhm.
true, what's the
Mhm.
reframe, what's the reality of it, what do they want their life to look like absent of this thing that's bothering them?
Nice.
Like,
Okay.
what is that
Absent. Mhm.
perfect day? What does that
Right.
perfect day in their life look like when
Mhm.
all of these things that are bothering them do not exist anymore? And
Mhm.
give your brain a vacation to think about the future, because, like I said, our brains are an artifact, a record keeper of the past. And so I always say you have to start remembering your future. You have to give your brain something to plan for, something to look forward to, something to look at the opportunities in life that are going to get you to that perfect day.
Right,
Because
right.
if you don't set that up for your brain, it
Mhm.
doesn't know what it's working towards and it will just keep focusing on everything in the
Right. It's
past.
like we have to give our brains an update too of who we are
Yes.
now, that we're not the teenager in high school with the jacket,
I
right?
love
That we,
that. It
yeah,
needs an update. I
right. It
love
needs an
that. That's
update at
brilliant.
201 or 2.1 or whatever it is.
That's
Mhm.
fantastic. I love that. Yep.
Well, I love talking to you today. I feel like these are things that we know, but we don't really know. You know what I mean? We don't really
100%.
internalize, know, work on, but we all know it. We all know this new language about vagus nerve and nervous systems and what the brain does. We all know it, but the
Yeah.
to get involved with really your own process in it, I think is what you're saying is like get really involved with your own process
Yeah.
around change. Um, do you want to end with a few things just to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, like top three things that you're doing right now?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a practice. It's at JackieMillerCoaching.com, again, where I help people through high conflict divorces. And you can learn more about that there. And then Jackie-Miller.com, working on speaking, do keynote speaking. And a lot of it is around self-talk and mindset in that arena, obviously, Susan. And very shortly in the next few months, I have a book coming out called Winning. I alluded to it earlier, and it's rewiring your brain and reclaiming your life after toxic love. And so if you're leaving a difficult relationship, it's about that, because I am so passionate about the science of understanding how our brains and bodies work and how to make them work for us. And so that will be out in Amazon in a few months.
Nice, great. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for all the good ideas and information. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to talking to you again and seeing you again.
Thank you
So
so
thanks
much,
a lot. Thanks
Susan.
so much.
Oh, so great speaking with you. Take care. Thanks so much.